Welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we are staring directly at the calm before the storm.
Hmm.
You know that feeling in a movie right at the end of the second act? Everything's converging, the music swells, and then it just goes quiet.
And you just know. This is it.
This is it. The final act is starting. That is the feeling we get from the text we're covering today.
It really is. It's that breathless moment right before the resolution.
We are looking at Revelation chapter 15. It's a surprisingly short chapter. I mean, only 8 verses long.
But the narrative weight is just immense.
Yeah, it's the bridge between the story of the beast, which we've looked at, and the final outpouring of what the text calls the bowl judgments.
It's the hinge point.
Yeah.
Everything before this has been leading up to it, and everything after flows directly from it. You can't skip this chapter.
And to help us navigate it, we're working with a theological breakdown, but also using a method we've mentioned before, the expanded plain sense.
Right. And for anyone new to that, it's a way of digging into the Greek and Hebrew roots to find the implied meaning. It's asking, what would this imagery trigger for the original audience?
So our mission today is to decode some incredibly dense symbolism. We're talking a sea of glass mixed with fire, harps, golden bowls.
And smoke so thick it literally shuts down heaven. And we have to understand what the text means by the completion of God's wrath. That's a concept that is genuinely terrifying if you sit with it.
Let's just jump right in. Verse 1, John says, "Then I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, and he sees 7 angels with the 7 last plagues."
And that phrase, great and marvelous, is doing so much work. The source notes really emphasize this isn't just scenery. It's a signal flare.
It's telling you to pay attention.
Exactly. The scale of what's about to happen is totally different from the seals or the trumpets. This is the main event.
And the text says, "For in them the wrath of God is complete." I want to pause on that word, complete. Because when we think of wrath, we think of an emotional outburst, right? A tantrum.
But the Greek here implies something much more structural, much more precise. This is where that expanded plain sense helps. The word is etelesthi.
Etelesthi. That sounds familiar.
It should. It has the same root as tetelesthi.
Wait, that's what Jesus cried out on the cross? It is finished.
That's the one. The word means something is perfected, finished, or fully carried out. It's about bringing a process to its intended goal.
So this isn't God losing his temper.
No. It's a process of justice reaching its necessary teleological end. This is the calculated climax of judgment.
That's a fascinating parallel. So the cross was the completion of salvation.
And this is the completion of justice, the other side of the same coin.
Yeah.
The settling of accounts.
Wow. Okay, that reframes everything. So moving to verse 2, John sets the stage. And this is where the visuals get, really wild. He sees something like a sea of glass mingled with fire.
And that language calls back to earlier in the book.
Right. We've seen the sea of glass before, in front of God's throne.
Yes, back in Revelation 4, it symbolizes purity, holiness, that sort of crystal clear stillness of God's throne room. But here, there's a new element.
It's mingled with fire. That is such a contrast. Glass is cool and calm, fire is not.
Well, the source breakdown points to a dual meaning. On one hand, yes, the fire is the divine wrath that's about to pour out from the throne. The temperature has changed, so to speak.
God is in judgment mode.
But it also speaks to the people standing on that sea. The fire also represents the fiery trials they just came out of.
Let's talk about them. The text calls them the victors. It says they have victory over the beast, over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name.
It's a full resume of resistance. They didn't bend on any point.
But here's the paradox, right? Because earlier, the narrative says the beast overcomes the saints. He kills them. So how are they the victors if they're dead?
And that is the central irony of the whole book.
Yeah.
Spiritually, they're the only victors. The source says they were faithful unto death. They refused the mark. They resisted the deception.
So by the world's standards, they lost. Completely.
They were executed, deleted. But by standing on this sea above the fire, the text is saying, no, this is what winning looks like. They triumphed because they didn't compromise their faith.
That's a powerful definition of victory. It's about fidelity, not just survival.
Exactly. And look what they're holding.
Harps of God.
Now be honest. When you hear harps in heaven, what do you picture?
I 100% picture a cartoon angel on a cloud. Maybe a baby in a diaper, looking bored.
Right. It feels so passive. We have to scrub that image completely. In the Old Testament, the harp was an instrument of prophecy, of intense temple worship. It wasn't background music.
It was for proclamation.
Yes. Amidst all this fire and judgment, their primary activity is active prophetic worship.
Which brings us to what they're singing. It's not just random music. Our breakdown calls this the Song of Unity.
It's a remix, a mashup.
It really is. Verse 3 says they sang the Song of Moses, the servant of God, and the Song of the Lamb.
And if you know your Bible, that should just set off all the alarms.
Why that combination? Moses and the Lamb.
Well, think about where they're standing. On a sea.
Okay.
Where else in the Bible do we see God's people standing by a sea, singing a song of victory after escaping a tyrant?
Oh, a Red Sea? Exodus 15.
Exactly. The Song of Moses is the very first song in the Bible. It's about God delivering Israel from Pharaoh. Physical deliverance.
And now, at the end of the Bible, they're singing it again.
They're singing it right alongside the Song of the Lamb. The Song of Moses is about the Old Covenant, freedom from physical slavery. The Song of the Lamb is the New Covenant, victory over sin and evil.
So by mashing them up, they're basically connecting the entire biblical story.
They're synthesizing all of salvation history.
Yeah.
The source says it's the joining of the Old and New Covenants into one unified reality. The God who crushed Pharaoh is the same God about to crush the beast.
That's incredible. It makes the whole Bible feel like one single story arc.
It ties it all together.
And listen to the lyrics. Great and marvelous are your works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are your ways, O King of the Saints.
Or King of the Nations in some manuscripts. The point is, they're focused on God's works and his ways.
And what stands out to me is just and true. These are people who were just persecuted, martyred. They saw the worst of the beast's empire. And their first conclusion is that God is just.
And it's so important this happens before the bowls are poured out, before the final judgment falls. The victims themselves are validating the court's decision. They're testifying that what's about to happen is fair.
And then verse 4 starts with the question, who shall not fear you, O Lord, and glorify your name?
It's rhetorical, of course. The answer is no one.
For you alone are holy. But then it says, for all nations shall come and worship before you. Now that feels a little optimistic given what's about to happen.
Why do you say that?
Well, we're about to see the world get leveled by plagues, it seems. Counterintuitive to be singing about all nations coming to worship.
That's a great observation. The source links this to the millennial kingdom, the era after the judgment. The song is looking past the destruction to the ultimate result.
So the judgment isn't the end. It's the means to an end.
It clears the way for that universal worship. And the verse gives the reason. For your judgments have been manifested, made visible.
So we have this amazing, triumphant worship scene. But then in verse 5, the camera moves. John looks away from the singers.
And the whole tone shifts from celebration to solemn preparation.
It says, the temple of the Tabernacle of the Testimony in heaven was opened. That is a mouthful.
It is. We need to break that down. The Tabernacle of the Testimony is the Holy of Holies, the inner sanctum where the Ark of the Covenant was.
And the Ark held the 10 Commandments, the testimony.
Exactly. So John is seeing into the very heart of God's covenantal law. And the fact that it's opened, well, that's significant.
What does that mean, that it's opened?
Usually it was sealed off. The source explains that its opening here isn't an invitation. It means God is stepping out. He is acting on behalf of his holiness. It's like the doors of a missile silo opening. Something is about to come out.
And what comes out are the 7 angels in verse 6.
The agents of judgment.
And their wardrobe is so specific. It says they're clothed in pure bright linen and having their chests girded with golden bands.
It's a striking image.
Yeah, because I'd expect battle armor. Something dark and menacing. But they're dressed like priests.
And that's the key. The pure bright linen represents holiness, divine purity. It tells you this isn't a brawl. It's a liturgical act of cleansing.
So the judgment is clean.
It's dazzlingly clean. It's not malicious. It's light removing darkness. And the golden bands signal their authority. They come straight from God's presence.
So they step out, and then in verse 7, we get the handoff.
The transfer of the payload.
It says, one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God.
We've seen those creatures before. They're the highest order of angels, the ones closest to the throne.
So this is coming from the top, but I want to focus on these bowls.
The imagery here is a terrifying inversion.
Because usually these bowls, these censers were used for incense, right? For the prayers of the saints.
Exactly. In Revelation 5, it explicitly says, the golden bowls of incense are the prayers of the saints. They're holding up the cries for justice.
But look at what they hold now, the wrath of God.
The source suggests a direct connection. The implication is that the bowls of prayer have been flipped. They've been turned into bowls of judgment. The prayers have been answered.
Wow. when the prayers go up, eventually the wrath comes down.
And notice the description attached. It's the wrath of God who lives forever and ever.
Why add that part?
It underlines the finality of it. Because God is eternal, his authority and judgment are eternal. This isn't a temporary ruling. This is final.
So the angels have the bowls. And then in verse 8, this is, for me, the scariest verse in the chapter.
It's the most dramatic moment, for sure.
The temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power.
And smoke is a classic biblical symbol for the overwhelming direct presence of God.
Like at Mount Sinai.
Exactly. The source specifically parallels this to Exodus 40, when the tabernacle was finished. The glory filled it so much that Moses himself couldn't even enter.
It sounds suffocating, the glory and the power.
It's overwhelming holiness.
Mm-hmm.
And then comes the consequence. The text says, and no one was able to enter the temple till the 7 plagues were completed.
Wait, no one was able to enter? What does that actually mean?
It means the time for intercession is over.
That just stops you in your tracks. The whole
Yes.
point of the temple is that it's the place you go to plead for mercy.
Right. It's a place of mediation. But now, the doors are shut. The source says this means divine judgment is now in progress, and it is irreversible.
Until the plagues were completed.
Once this process starts, it cannot be paused. It can't be stopped by prayer. The hotline is disconnected, The intercession is suspended until justice is done.
A closed heaven. That's a terrifying thought.
It is the silence of the judge after the gavel falls.
So, the arc of this chapter. We start with this triumphant song on the sea of glass. It's loud, it's hopeful.
It's celebrating the victory that comes through judgment.
And then we move to the temple. The angels get their commission. They take these inverted offering bowls.
And finally, the smoke fills the room. And everything just goes silent in terms of access.
It highlights that contrast the source mentions, the marvelous sign versus the terrifying finality of the closed temple.
It forces you to hold 2 ideas at once. God is the object of this universal worship, the King of Saints. But he is also the executor of final justice, who eventually says, time is up.
It's not an either, it's both.
It is both. And that's what makes this chapter such a powerful, necessary bridge. It validates the justice of what's coming before it even happens.
As we wrap up this deep dive, there's a final thought from the source material that I think is really worth chewing on.
What's that?
It's about the smoke. It says the temple was filled with smoke, specifically from the glory of God.
Yes.
And, in our modern context, we usually think of glory as something beautiful and inviting, like a warm light. We sing songs like, "Show me your glory."
Right. We treat it as something we want to get closer to. We associate it with grace, with accessibility.
But here, the glory of God manifests as a barrier. It prevents entry. It stops intercession. It's a side of glory we don't often talk about. Glory as the absolute, unapproachable weight of final judgment.
That's a profound distinction. We equate glory with safety. But in this text, glory is the mechanism of closure. It's the cosmic do not enter sign. It reminds us that God's glory isn't just his beauty, it's also his dangerous, consuming holiness.
So it's asking us to consider a definition of glory that includes that kind of terrifying finality.
It certainly does. It's the glory that demands everything be made right, no matter how painful the process.
Well, that's all for this deep dive into Revelation chapter 15. The victors are singing, the temple is closed.
And the bowls are ready. The stage is set for the end.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next deep dive.